Hi everybody. I'm going to review some of the selection tools that we used last night, because what we want to do for this assignment is we want to select a portion of an image and combine it with another image, or we're going to select a portion of the image, replicate it, and add it back to the same image. So each image that we're going to work on is going to require probably a little bit different approach as far as how to go about selecting what you want to remove or copy, and each image is a little bit different, requires a little bit different approach. Anyway, you've probably already seen that from, if you watch some of the YouTube videos, for example, you've seen a photographer work on a model that has lots of hair. Her hair was a lot different than the background, so it was a lot easier to separate than it is in this situation. So what I'm doing right now in this part of the video is just going to give you some refresher and some guidelines to follow. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing here. Do whatever works for you. So I want to go into go over some of the selection tools. The easiest one to use is the lasso tool. It's right up here. And when I lasso, I just make a circle. I click, I drag, I let go. Photoshop finishes meeting the endpoints. Even if I cross them, Photoshop is going to find the beginning and the end point and meet them together. Okay. So now if you notice, I've got this on, I've got in the options bar, we've got 4 different selections here, options for my selection tool. I've got new selection, I've got add to selection, I've got subtract from selection. I've got the intersection here, but that's very rarely used for photographers. Designers will use that a lot more often. Now when I'm on the new selection tool, every time I make a new selection, my old one disappears. So if this is happening to you, make sure you do not have this selected. New selection option will erase your old one as soon as you create a new one. As photographers, we're usually trying to do a lot of individual selections, and so add to selection is generally where you want to be. And now I can add to my selection like so. Now I don't have to be in the same vicinity. I can put a selection over here. That is one selection, even though they're in different parts of the image. This is all one selection. Okay. Now let's say I decide I want to subtract one of these circles that I made, or a portion of them. I could go to subtract from selection, and I could go around that. Boom, it's gone. Or maybe just half of that one, and that's gone. And here, and that's gone. A little tip here, if you're working in add selection, see I have the little plus sign next to my lasso. If I hold down the option key, it turns into a minus. So if you're constantly going back and forth from adding to a selection to subtracting from that selection, you can just hold down the option key while you're in add selection, and it will automatically flip over to subtract from selection. Very handy when you're doing a lot of work going back and forth. Anyway, so that is the, I'm going to hit Command D or Control D will get rid of that selection. And I'm going to go to the Polygon Lasso tool. Polygon Lasso tool is great for geometric shapes. You can click and click and click and click, and then you get back to your endpoint, and that little zero, that little circle appears. See that little circle will appear right when I get right next to it, and I'll click again and it'll connect them up. I'll do it over here in this white area so you can see a little bit better. Again, I'm in new selection, so as soon as I click, that disappears. I'm not clicking and dragging. I'm just clicking, moving the mouse, clicking again, moving the mouse, clicking, clicking. And it doesn't have to be a square. You can do any sort of geometric shape. I get back to the beginning point, turns to 0, I click and it closes. Now, let's say for some reason I've gone off here, and I can actually go off the edge of my image if I want to make sure and get that all of that right side of the image. And I don't have to get to my endpoint, I can just double click. So click, drag, click, drag, not drag, I'm sorry, click and just move the mouse. And I don't even have to get near here if I don't want to. I can just be right over here and I will double click. So, if you've got a geometric shape you want to copy or move, then that's a great tool to use. Let me go to the magnetic lasso tool. Now, I used this last night to go around her eyeglasses, around the front of her face, because those edges are sharp. The background is out of focus. She is in focus and the background's out of focus. So the magnetic lasso tool worked pretty well. You could also use another cool tool called the quick selection tool, and I'll go over that in a second. But I could use this magnetic lasso tool, and in this case, I click and then I drag. And I just have to stay right near the edge. And if you notice, it does a pretty good job. And I can go in here, and then I can just double click and we'll connect the two. Now, up here, width, notice 100 pixels, contrast. So it's going to look, if my contrast, if I increase my contrast, set it to 100. Yep. If that starts happening, if you accidentally click somewhere and you're trying, you say, how do I get rid of this crazy thing? All you have to do is hit the escape key, and it'll take you back. I'm going to Command D to remove that selection. So now what I did is I increased the width, and now I can get a little bit further away. Whoops. So, magnetic lasso tools can be good for a clear-cut edge. Command D to get out of that. We can also let's see what I want to do. I want to go into the quick selection tool, and here you'll usually want to use this on the area that you want to select. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to go along, and Photoshop is trying to figure out what I'm trying to do here. And I could try and go down into some other areas too with this. Now, little tip here. I did that on all one step. I don't have to do that. I can go in here and I can just click and click and click. I can click and drag with the click selection tool, or I can just click. Now, see, every time I let go of the mouse, I create another step. This gives me more flexibility if I make a mistake and I want to go back to one little step. And Command D. Let's say I go in here and I do all this work. I'm selecting her and selecting her and selecting, and then I go, oops, Now I let go of the mouse, and what's happened? I've only made one step. I have to throw away all the work I just did because I made that mistake near the end. So when you're selecting, think in terms of tiny little steps. Make a lot of tiny little steps, and you'll always be able to go back into your history panel. Don't forget, history panel is your best friend. You can go back in here, and you can go back. Generally, how your preferences set up, usually I think the default is 50. That's a good recommended number of steps to be able to go back. Also, if you're in the history, if you're at a stage in your image where you're concerned that you may lose some of your work because you may make a mistake on a mask or whatever it is you're doing, you can go over here and hit on the camera button, and it'll create a snapshot. And if you scroll up to the top, you'll see there's created another snapshot. Now I'm going to preserve this state of the image as it is now, and I can always get back to it. As long as the image is open. Correction. Once I save it and close it, my snapshot goes away and all my history information goes away. Okay. So there's the quick selection tool. Magic Wand tool. I really like the Magic Wand tools. Probably one of my favorite tools. What it's doing is it's picking pixels that are similar color, and we can change our tolerance to increase the amount of pixels that we'll select. Contiguous is going to select adjoining pixels. So if I have contiguous selected, I set my tolerance up a little high for right now. I'll show you. So I want to, let's say if I want to select the sky here. Click on that. I've got contiguous. It selected all of the sky here. Now, if I did not have contiguous selected, and I select the sky, notice it also selects some of the sidewalk. So similar in color tone, but not neighboring pixels. So, but it selected them. That's great if you've got a tree and you're trying to select the sky out of a tree or something like that, where you've got a lot of tiny little pockets. Command D, I want to get rid of that. And now, I can also change my tolerance. Like I could set my tolerance down to 5, let's say, and even though it's not contiguous, I bet you anything it's just going to select the sky. Let's see what happens. Yep, just the sky, but also see what happens. That little softness around the edges of the buildings, which are not the same density, it has not selected those. So I would want to increase tolerance for those. To select that. There we go. A little bit better. Anyway, a lot of these selections that you do are going to take a lot of work, and you may have to make mistakes and you go back and you forth. So anyway, so that's the Magic Wand. Again, we've got options up here. We've got subtract mode. You've got add to mode. New selection, same as the others. Now, let's look up here at the top on when you're in the Magic Wand, when you're in the quick selection tool, when you're in your lasso tools. You've got this option up here. It's called Select and Mask. I'm going to hit Control D to end that selection. Select and Mask is unique because it's got that tool in there that's called Refine Edge. And that's this tool right over here. It's kind of interesting. They've got, it looks like hair that's right next to it. So I think that's what that tool is ideal for. In this image, it didn't really work that well, except for where the hair is out of focus. So a lot of times if the hair is a different color different tone than the background, it will work pretty well. One of the great things about this whole menu, this select and mask, is you've got different views you can choose from. Onion skin, which is this, gives me a little checkerboard pattern. You've got overlay. I can put it on white, black. Let me go back out of here. Go back to onion skin, and I'm going to go ahead and select something so you can see. Now in this toolbar here, you've got a lot of different things here. You've got your quick selection tool, you got your refine edge, and you've got a brush tool that you can use also. But mainly what I think you want to focus on when you go into this select and mask is your quick selection and the view. The view is really a great tool. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm just going to make a quick rough selection of Rebecca so we can see how this view method is working. Okay. All right. Now, you can also do this outside of this. I'm going to jump out of here this for a second, and I'm going to go in here and use my quick selection tool, and so you can see how it's working with this select and mask. So let's say I work on a selection a little bit, and I go, okay, I need to check and see how this is really going to look against a white background. Click on select and mask, and now I can go up here and I can see it on the onion skin, and I can increase the transparency, decrease it. I go in here, I can see what it's going to look like on white. Decrease the opacity, increase it. And what's really neat is you go into overlay and it automatically defaults to this red color. But now if I was going to put my image on a blue background, I could preview it and see what it might look like on a blue background, what she might look like on a blue background. Like that. Okay. I'm going to change this view back. Onion skin. And here's the refine edge if you want to use that like we did in class. And that worked pretty well on her hair in this part of the image. And all you do is just brush it kind of right along these edges. Now, when you're done with this, at this step, you can hit OK, and it'll take whatever steps I've done here, and it brings me back into regular Photoshop. But notice now, I've got marching ants around her hair down here. So my work in the select and mask is still here. I hit OK. I came out. If I had hit cancel, it wouldn't have saved anything from using the selection tool down here. But I hit OK and it came out. Now I've got my marching, and now I can go and use other tools if I want to at this point. So anyway, and I think you remember I was using the magic wand tool to go in here and try and select. Whoop, that was a little too far. So I'm going to hit Control Z, undo that. I need to set my tolerance down a little bit. Okay, and I can go in there and I can, whoop, too far. Again, this is why you want to do little steps. And after I've created your selection, something I didn't show you in class, you can go in and you can save your selection if you want. Let's say you're going to close out that image, and you're going to got to close up your laptop. You're going to go work on this image a little bit later on. If I save that image and I open it right now, my selection's going to be gone. However, what I can do is I can go in here and hit Save Selection, and I can name it. And I can say Rebecca, or whatever I want to call it. And it's going to save my selection. And I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit Control D now. I'm going to erase that selection. I'm going to go back up to Select. And I'm going to go Load Selection. And there it is, Rebecca. Hit OK. And there it is back again. So if you're in the middle of working on one of these selections and you have to close up your computer, make sure and save your selection, and then you can close your image and you can go back in and you can reload that selection. Okay.